welcome to Fusion for this month. Has everyone been here before? Is there any first timers to Fusion? Welcome.
Welcome.
Not you, you're familiar. So my name's Brooke, Education and Experience Manager here at the Business Centre. We are an organisation that's been around for more than 36 years. We exist to help people to realise their business dreams and goals, basically, in a nutshell. We created Business Fusion so we could have fun in talking about different topics that relate to business, but aren't workshops or training courses or advisory sessions. Basically a place where we can bring everyone together and chat about things that we find quite interesting or topical in business. So welcome. We have two amazing speakers here tonight. I'll get you to introduce yourselves, starting with you, Nat.
Oh, yeah, great. Hi, everybody. For those that were here last time, I met a few of you last time, but for those that are new, welcome. So I'm Natalie Welch. I spend my days doing a leadership learning and coaching practice. My professional background is in community services, which Tracy and I've crossed paths with before, so it's great to have Tracy here in the audience. So my remit is really around purpose leadership. So I love to particularly work with organisations for organisational development and cultural change. So working with humans I find quite fascinating, challenging, heart soul destroying, and all of the above. And it's kind of nice tonight to share the panel with my dear friend Karen Anson, because we've always described ourselves as like the yin and the yang. I tend to be very trusting and see the good side of people, and can quite often get blindsided by people at work. And Karen's always dealing in the dark employee relations side of HR. Do you want to explain who you are, Kaz?
Thanks, Nat. Yeah. No, we did work really well together. We described each other as the light and the dark. So yeah, it's funny because HR is so, there's so many facets. So I started my own company. I actually operated on my own name, Karen Anson, since 2019. And I wished I'd met you in 2019 when I was crying on my lounge, not knowing what to do with myself. But so 2019 started, and then we're just at the moment rebranding to a new brand called Ignite HR and Employment Law.
Excellent.
And we are 7 this week, so 7 people on board. So
congrats.
We are, yeah. So the journey that I've been on, actually having a business and understanding and having worked with people and advising in their businesses, I have to sometimes take my own advice.
The hardest.
Yeah. So look, we do everything, all the spectrum of HR, but my specialty is the most difficult people in your organisation. So I get to deal with everything from bullying to all sorts of discrimination claims and all the legal stuff, all the tricky legal stuff. So
I can't imagine what you've dealt with, but hopefully you'll be able to share a bit tonight.
Yeah. Thank you, Brooke.
You were going to the dark side tonight, which is going to be exciting.
Totally. So we hear a lot of conversations, and we had one even last month, about all these incredible inspirational leadership models and how people can do such incredible things as leaders and managers in business. And that's wonderful, not taking anything away from that. But today we want to talk about the real stuff, how hard it is to work with humans, and just sometimes how no matter what your intentions are, things go south really, really quick. So there's that old adage of don't work with children and young people, no, children and animals. It was. But I'll tell you what, a child or an animal has never asked me about what super they should invest in, or, how to do the job that they were actually employed to do. So, I don't know. I might choose sheep any day, I've decided.
And chickens.
Yeah. And maybe some horses. So tonight we're just going to have a pretty candid, relaxed conversation about that. And we're going to start with, what are some of the trickiest parts of managing a team that you guys have encountered?
So Kaz and I often collaborate with each other, and we've got a program called Change the Game, right? So sometimes we're like SAS. Sometimes it's like when extraction
I've never thought of it like that.
So we get dropped in to, we may not look agile, but we actually do get ourselves in there.
Crawling on them.
Yeah, That's right.
HR
Yeah,
SWAT.
so sometimes it's the owner of the business wanting to get extracted out, or it can be, you know, they've got a team member that they need to extract out. But often, you know, when it talks about managing teams, you know, it's a practice, and it's never a static landscape. I think it's always shifting and moving, and I think really for me, when you're managing teams, it really starts with yourself. That's where to put the investment first, is who you are, because, you know, as Brene Brown says, who you are is how you lead. And I think that when it comes to managing teams, I think if you can sit there first and be comfortable in your own space and discomfort when it comes to leading people, I think that's the gift of the game, or the mastery of the game. Would you agree?
I would,
Yeah.
No, well, for me, and it's interesting that you use that analogy, because when I take myself back to when we were working together on it was a bigger client, and the way that we used to do it was work with the leaders around, you know, the difficult conversations that you need to have, working with people. I mean, I can teach people how to do it. I guess I can show them how I do it. But what I want people to do is do it authentically, and be able to have language around delivering messages that are difficult with people, because avoiding things only ever ends up in a disaster most of the time. And you know that even in your personal life, when you know, it's no different at work. So if you are an avoider of conflict, or you're an avoider of difficult people, then all that happens is that difficult person quite often becomes more difficult, and, you know, then you're up at night worrying about it. And you know, when I usually come in, it's almost like the cavalry's here, she's here to help us, but I don't often want to do that. I want to actually help people learn how to do it themselves.
So one thing I wanted us to focus on tonight is about how, regardless of the way leaders and managers go about their day, and how you guys actually help facilitate them do their jobs better, the accountability and ownership around the individuals that work within the teams, and how what everyone brings to the table really impacts enjoyment in the workplace, productivity, of course, but about how that can really test a culture, drive a business to the wall sometimes when you've got difficult people in the organisation. So I love hearing that you help and facilitate leaders in the business, but I would love to delve a little bit more deeper into the really difficult people that you encounter in the workplace, and just the realistic sort of flow on of their behaviour.
Yeah, well, I was going to mention a little bit later, but might be an opportunity now. One of the companies that we've worked on together, there was probably a toxic leader amongst their troops or amongst their team, and often you find in organisations perhaps they've been promoted more out of complacency than anything else. They've found themselves in sort of leadership roles, and we had a founder owner who was wanting to step back from the business, and we talked to them a bit about, you know, if you're familiar with Cartman's drama triangle, you know, the role of rescuer, victim and persecutor, which often plays out in teams and can play out the roles in drama, in conflict. And what when I shared that model with them about how that we can play each role, the founder and owner actually realised she'd been enabling the toxic behaviour for a long while, and then she sort of had that real aha moment and that's just about that consciousness level sometimes for us when we go in is really just try to create that awareness piece about what's happening here, and having that conscious thought to step back from that and to zoom out and say what's happening here, because
that triangle is a game changer for me. I've got it on a sticky note on my screen. And it's about how do I as an individual contribute in that triangle. Is everyone familiar with that?
The Cartman triangle?
I was wondering if you could elaborate on that, please.
Yeah,
really
I need a pen and paper. So if you imagine a triangle with 3 points and the drama, so often in workplaces we can see drama, we observe it, and generally there's 3 roles being played in any drama circle or circles of drama, and you can play all 3 roles within yourself, and you can also see people play out the roles with each other. So the first role is the persecutor. So the persecutor typically is sitting in the control seat, maybe blaming and shaming people, maybe micromanaging, all those sort of more toxic behaviours with more I win, you lose type of mentality. I'm right, you're wrong, yeah? And then we often see what we call the victim. Yep, I'm helpless. And apathetic. It's all happening to me. In that case that we talked about with that founder, that's the role of the toxic person. Was definitely who was head of HR, ironically, that's where she was playing from. She used to start statements with, "I'm really sorry. I apologise." Right. So she was always coming from that. I need to be rescued.
Yeah.
And we gave her the feedback that it actually was disempowering every time she started a statement. It was because she would also mention that if I'm not good enough for here, get rid of me. Like that was her other positioning statement. So it was that real
It was
sort
a
of
passive aggressive,
passive aggressive,
way
a
of
passive
dealing with things. Yeah.
Gone with the wind.
yeah, but it was also creating like an over dependence for her, and also she was shielding other workers, and so what we often see when these
I call it gathering the troops.
gathering the troops, yeah.
So, you know, when someone has a problem, they want to be right about something, they gather as many people around them that they can to justify their behaviour. Over and over again, they'll tell a story.
Yeah.
And sometimes it gets worse and worse and worse and escalates even beyond what's actually happened.
Totally.
Yeah.
So what you can often see with that victim role is learned helplessness is in there. The other role that you can see play out is the rescuer. So they're often the people that people go to, and sometimes they're enabling the toxic or the
I
bad
definitely
behaviour.
have done that.
And it's
in
a
my
sort
job.
of a vicious, what Cartman talks about, it's a vicious circle that you
Yeah.
can find yourself in, right? And sometimes we're not even conscious that we're playing the roles or
Yeah.
the behaviours playing out, right? But we feel the drama or negative consequence. So I think I actually just had this conversation with a coachee today, is that sometimes you've got to just recognise the moments when it's happening,
Yeah.
and make different choices or step out of that. So I think that some of that, it's an awareness piece. When I said before, is start with self.
Yeah.
That's really the key to unlocking it, right? And we want to create more creative conversations where people are open to change, and that we want to, or adapting. I think we mentioned culture before, but like you really want to recruit people who are culture contributors, not just for culture fit, right? So people that want to get in the play as opposed to create drama or
Yes.
cynicism or knock your knees out sort of type of behaviour. I wore these pants tonight because it's a jungle out there, right? And I was thinking about that. Yeah, right, the Underbelly song, you know the song, It's a Jungle Out There? Yeah, so is it sometimes...
Welcome to the jungle.
Yeah, I know, Guns N' Roses.
Fun and games.
So, yeah, sometimes that's tricky. It's a slippery slope.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, any other dark behaviours you...
Well, I was sort of going to come at it from a bit of a different angle because quite often my clients are frightened of having the difficult conversations with people whose behaviours needs addressing, right? So, you know, I have a conversation quite often with somebody and they tell me that all these things are happening and it's always a terrible, horrible situation. But I always say for example, when we have the difficult person in the meeting, and I quite often start the meeting and I ask questions. There's no statements about this is your behaviour. Are you aware that you're doing this? Are you aware of the effect that it has on people
How
around you?
specific are you? Like,
Very specific.
yeah.
Yeah, no,
Kim Scott, radical candour.
the thing,
Be prepared to piss people off.
but the thing for me,
With empathy.
it's about, well, with empathy, 100% it
Yeah.
is, and there's no attachment. I'm not invested in it, and what happens is the person that had all these relationships that you know Nat's talking about, you're in the fight, you're in this whole,
Yeah.
you're playing all the roles, and then you have someone come in and start to ask questions. Have you tried this? But when you're actually with someone who is in a difficult situation or behaviour needs addressing, you come at it from a completely different angle where there's no emotion involved. It's purely about the behaviour. And when you pick what behaviours you want to talk about, you want to pick stuff that's not subjective.
Yep.
Because sometimes when you don't talk to me in the morning when you come in, when you ignore me, when I send you 3 emails and you've ignored me, there's a really easy answer to that. I was busy, or I didn't see you, or all of those things, right? But what I say to them is, let's pick the things that we can actually have a conversation about.
Okay.
Okay, so it's really important for you to unpack that as someone who is going through this kind of process with someone. For example, if you've got a difficult employee or you've got a problem that you need to solve, you need to look at it from that perspective. Of course, all the other stuff, you know, the stuff that if it's really bothering you, I always encourage people to, you know, to really to say, look, this bothers me. I know that you have a different opinion. We don't have to agree,
Yeah,
right?
that's
We don't have to agree on this. We can walk away and disagree, but healthy conflict, I always say to people, healthy conflict is part of a workplace and should always be.
Yeah,
Because if you can't have those difficult conversations,
Yeah.
that's when you need an employment lawyer like me to come in and deal with
Yeah.
the really gnarly claims. And I think it's an epidemic. I do think, yeah, I think it's an epidemic, yeah. I think people are avoiders. I think people are avoiders. I think a lot of people are avoiding conflict.
Or they're fearful about, I might end up in Fair Work if I say something, or what the consequences could be.
Yeah.
That's sometimes why
and
there's
the perception is that it's expensive.
Yeah, because there's no, as Katie said before, there's no rule book
No.
for this. Like when we talk about culture and how you navigate within that space, like there's not a, you know, you got to sort of feel your way through it at times, and sometimes you will make mistakes, and sometimes you need to step back, or you need to go and get help, or get some third party advice. But because I think that people are complex, right? And that's the beauty of it. That's actually why I like to dabble in the space. But I think that there's a time where you can't let fear drive your decisions. So sometimes avoidance for...
But you also
Yeah.
have to ask yourself that question too. When you're dealing with something, you have to say, where is this feeling coming from? Is it true? Is it real?
Yes,
Is it in my head?
yes.
Is it a perception thing, or is this really actually something I can deal with? And so when you kind of ask yourself those questions, and what is the emotion that it's attached to that?
Yeah.
So then you kind of have to sort of look at yourself that way, and then say, okay, it is something I can deal with, and no, it's not fear-based, it's fact, and I can deal with it, and
I
I'm
see
going
a
to
new
be brave
sticky
about
note in
doing
my
it.
future with all of these things.
Oh,
It's usually heightened.
half of my job is, I often say at the end of a meeting, I say, you leave this with me tonight, and I'll figure out a path forward, and I'll check with you if that's what you need, but you're going to go home and go to bed tonight. You're going to go to sleep because the problem's mine now. You've unpacked it. Yeah, I do
Wow.
that all the time, my clients. Yeah, it's only because I know they've been in the fight. I call it the fight, but it's not a fight. They've tried everything.
In the
They've
turmoil,
tried
in the
being
emotion.
nice about it. They've tried, you know, everything in their head. Every morning they get up and they think, oh, I'm going to deal with this today. I'm going to actually get on top of it. And then something happens and you go, oh, I can't deal with this. It's too much for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, how do you go about measuring performance of people in the workplace versus just being a human? So quite often when you're working with individuals and you know there's KPIs, you know there's performance driver conversations you've got to have, but there's also the awareness that the people that you work with are just humans. They've got their own life experiences. They've got their own stuff going on. You know, we're just a group of humans. That's all this life's about.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a dance.
Yeah.
Between, you can have too much and too little. So Adam Grant, who I'm a bit of a fan of, who's an org psych, he talks about there's two fundamental dimensions. So it's what you talked about there before, Brooke, results versus relationships. So sometimes you can have too much or too little of both, and it's really, but they're value propositions, right? And the other tension point that you can often see is around, are you rule driven? Yeah. So you've got so many policies and so many tight edges that there's no really wriggle room for people. Or you're on the other end and you're risk adverse, right? So it's not safe to try here. So people need a license to go to the bathroom. So it's a bad example, hey? But essentially, yeah, I'll go back. So So if you imagine it like on a, I'm usually a visual drawer, but like imagine it on a scale, right? So they call it the 4 deadly sins, right? So if you are too, I suppose, result driven, the sin that could start to appear is toxicity in the workplace or toxic work cultures. So what we
Is
see
that
in
because of the competitiveness of it?
yeah, and it's a value over results over people.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're too heavy in that space, right? You don't see the people, it's about seeing the outcome for the business. Yep. And so in those sorts of situations, we start to see behaviours like toxic behaviours start to emerge, like gossiping, bullying, the competitive things like you talked about. We often see things like sideways conversations or, you know, because leadership is all about elevating others. Yeah, that's what leadership's about and managing a team's about. And if you're too focused on results or outcomes, you'll start to see these toxic behaviours, which is sort of the reason why people are, you've got to...
Would you like to draw?
Oh yeah, I'm such a drawer. Oh dear. No, this is going to let me run wild. This is the visual learner in me. Oh
I'm a
dear.
kinesthetic learner.
I know.
I don't do visual.
Yeah.
I'm totally have to draw everything.
The question is, can you remind me while Matt's
Yeah,
drawing?
it's just about balancing that, managing performance versus acknowledging people are just doing the workplace. And as a leader, quite often you strive to do the listening and to do all of the things that we're talking about. But again, it's about the accountability as well of the other individual about how they approach the conversation around their own performance, their ownership of their own role and responsibility, and them having a good day, bad day, good life, bad life.
Well, my background is I worked in the government for a very long time, probably too long, and then I worked in kind of employment. Actually, it was funny because my supervisors used to say, "You're making everyone look bad. Stop working so hard."
Oh no!
I've heard that before.
But you know, then I finally kind of I started when I was 17, so I've had that kind of government background, so I know what it's like to have super rule driven and everything within an inch of its life in terms of policies and you know everything's so organised. But then when I left, I went out in the private sector and. Before I started law, so I've had a lot of different... I've never worked in a law firm, interestingly. I've started my own law firm, but never worked in one. And so my kind of baptism to culture around this whole idea of people sort of being driven by their own drive, I guess is the only way you can describe it, was when I first went into HR. And it was interesting because I realised that when you have autonomy, we give people enough autonomy, but enough communication around what it is that is expected of them, but also take the individual and say, okay, what are their strengths? What are they actually, what do they bring to the table? And, you know, when you start to kind of look at people and not put people in square pegs in round holes, want to use an old analogy, you then start to work with people who are then performing at their best, I find. That's the only way I can describe when I worked in a culture that promoted that and how freeing it was around how you deal with people, and the conversations are different than you would have in an organisation where there's a lot of rules and a lot of, you know, and a lot of restriction, rigidity and that kind of thing. But does that answer the question? Sort of. I mean, that's my... Anyway, that's...
The question I've probably got is the person who you would talk about as avoiding, what if they constantly deal with the person on the polar opposite who doesn't listen to what anybody has to say to them? They're always geared up for a debate, and that's the only mindset they have. Instead of listening to what the other person wants to say to them and convey that message, they're ready to argue all the time.
They're combative. Yeah.
How do you deal with them?
I deal with them quite well.
That's a short answer.
They just don't bother me.
No, but
People,
how
but the
should
thing is,
other
other people
person
who is,
learn
it is
to
bothering
deal?
them. Yeah. Well,
Because they've got to get past it in order to be...
Oh, I
But
100%.
I think you had the answer in your question.
Yeah.
So you said that it's about that how you show up for
Yes.
people, and it's about the art of listening, yeah,
Yep.
and it's also being able to call it or give that feedback or to the person that they're not consciously listening to you or not how they show up, yeah, because sometimes that people aren't consciously aware of the behaviour, right, and you know, because we can recognise in others sometimes more than we can recognise in ourselves. So I think it's also having the authentic confidence to call it out and be okay if you rattle a person.
Or
yeah.
not. Sometimes you pick your battles with people too.
Yeah,
Some
that's true.
people's
Yeah,
behaviours
you've
are
got
not
to
about
learn to
you.
develop that
Well, some
muscle.
people's behaviours are not about you.
Yeah.
And, you know, you've really got to look at it from the perspective of, okay, this is affecting me because I'm in a mindset where it is going to affect me. And sometimes you do obviously need people to listen to what you've got to say, but find different ways to deal with, you know, different communication styles, work with different people,
Yeah.
you know, and
And what does that person value?
I'm a
What's that
big believer in coaches.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of
But
coaching.
also, sometimes it's good to know what people's currency is.
Yes.
So what's their
So
currency?
they've got to recognise their own value first in order to...
Or
Well,
you to connect
can,
the dots to
yeah,
what they value.
recognise it in
So let me
them.
devil's advocate this
Yeah.
a bit. You've got a small business owner who is incredibly good at what they do. They've gone out on their own, they've started a business, they're starting to grow, they're starting to employ people. And now they have to know all of this. This is something that may not be inherent in them.
No,
they
it's
may
not.
not
As I
have
said,
the
there's no
time
rule
to
book.
No, there
learn.
isn't. No.
What on earth do we expect of these individuals, I guess is my
And it keeps
statement,
people up
not
at
a question.
night.
It does. It really
And
does.
it does, and I know.
Yeah, I think it's the values piece. I'm going to keep coming back to that, right? It's and the mindsets that you're trying to create inside your business. So and also it's the alignment to the values that's critical because that's where conflict starts, right? It's a misalignment with the value piece. So what you have to be my display girl.
Yes, please.
It's
Barrel
a
girl.
terrible drawing and terrible spelling, right? But that's the that's the Cartman's drama triangle, right? Which you'll be able to download and there's a solution on how to flip that round for yourself as well. And I can send the handout to Brooke and we can get it out to you.
Yep, we can.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, but when I said before, these are values, right, or tensions that often exist inside businesses, which is, you know, as a founder, how much emphasis or value do you put on risk? Yep. How open are you for people to take risks, measured risks, right? Because we can't,
Can you give an example?
yeah, like I always ask the question, is it safe to try? So I'll give you an idea. Brewery, someone comes to you and says, I've got a great idea for production. Yeah. So rather than you give a flat no because it's too risky, it's outside what you normally do or outside the box, you say, oh, is it safe to try or how can we look at that, right? It's a different approach rather than having a hard no. Yeah, boy, that's not within your job role. I don't need you to give that answer. Yeah, which you hear, yeah. So when we see anarchy, which is the sin of being too risk adverse, we see chaos, right? Chaos theory being played out. People start to make their own rules as a form of rebellion. Yeah, they will operate in a chaos theory. When it comes to there's no boundary. Your job as I think I might have said this last time, but your job as a business owner is to be a boundary rider, right? You want to create a safe space for people to play in, yeah, when it comes to how your business operates, the culture tone set within that. Yep. So if you're operating too far down here, you'll get rebellion, yeah, because it'll annoy people, yeah.
I've worked in workplaces like
Yeah,
that.
I'm sure we all have if I was to survey. But so you really want this, you still need to be risk centric, yeah, but you don't want to be too much of that, yeah. So this is your sweet spot. So the other end of this tension is often too many rules. Yep, so you sometimes see employers hide behind code of conducts or...
I'm glad they do, or
Yeah.
I wouldn't have my job.
That's right. But I'm here to tell you that that's not all there is.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, right.
But you have to have some rules. you know, in terms of being able to hold people accountable,
Yes.
and those rules need to be able to be communicated as reasonable.
Yes.
Otherwise, I have got no chance of being able to hold people
And that's that
accountable.
boundary writing I was talking about, right?
Yeah.
But it's when you've got too many rules, right? An organisation that shall not be named had 700 policies when I joined the organisation, right? No,
Wow.
no joke. A lot of it was duplication because it had just been kept added to. But people get lost in the system. They don't know, too much bureaucracy, or it takes too long to get things approved. Yeah. Or when I talked about over dependence, everything's going through you as an owner. Yeah.
Yep.
All the decisions are going through you, and you're building up your pile of responsibility. The other end of this is, which is your question originally, which is around relationships and results.
Yeah.
So when we are too focused on relationships, sometimes we slip into too much people pleasing or wanting to be liked as a leader or manager, and we place too much, it sounds terrible because I'm a people person, but place too much emphasis on relationships, and we can see mediocrity come into place. So some of the negative consequences of that, if I'm in the dark side, is around we see people get put into promotions that are actually beyond their capability level, right? And then they get stagnant or stuck at that level, yeah, because actually they were probably promoted beyond where they actually were operating at, or
Set up
where
to fail.
they needed more development, yeah. And then the other side of this is where the toxicity, right, which is really the place you want to avoid, is if these sorts of behaviours are creeping into your workplace with regard to bullying and harassment, people starting to be bystanders, not speaking up, all those undermining, gaslighting, perfectionism sits in there, setting really high standards and nobody can actually attain them. Presenteeism is another big one we see out there for that. That's because it's too result-centric and not enough balance with relationships. So when I said before it's a bit of a dance, that's what I kind of meant. You've got to be able to know thyself to know thy team, which is really being able to slide against this scale to know if you're too heavy.
Yeah, sometimes you have to slide into the dark side and then go back to the light.
That's right.
I love how you're an advocate for the dark side.
When people show up, but they're only working to the minimum standard. So they're not doing enough to get into trouble, but they're just doing enough to show up to say, I'm here.
Just oozing along.
That's the new buzzword for it. But yeah. So it's still problematic
Pleasantly
behaviour.
ineffective.
Yeah. Quiet quitting, I'm not really a fan of the term, but essentially it's disengagement, right? It's a form of disengagement.
When I
but it starts to erode your business.
When I read emails sometimes, I look at them and I think I can almost go to any Fair Work case and read it as if it would be, at Fair Work. So I read it and I think, okay, how do I unpack this so that for the person, for example, if it's a disciplinary matter, how do I unpack that for this person so that they understand how we got here and what the end result is? I quite often have conversations with people to say, where we are we at the end? Are we really at the end here? Is there no way of there's no goodwill left? If there's no goodwill left, then we need to have a chat about exit, about you going and what that looks like. Yeah. Because people are sometimes really grateful for that conversation. People avoid that conversation often, because it's too scary, because they're scared they're going to be accused of some
so
kind of
entrenched in their fight.
Well, that they're going as an employee might be accused of of constructive dismissal or something by having that conversation.
Yep.
But it's not. It's this is what I see. This is my perception of where you are. Is that where you are, or is there something here? Is there some goodwill left?
Yep.
Yeah.
Can it be saved?
Yeah.
We had a funny discussion today in our team day. We were talking about a code of conduct or what that actually means, but we decided we were going to create one for our customers.
It's a huge deal because when you first start, like when I first started, I was everything to everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you can't do that either. You can't.
No way.
No.
No way. But we were like,
Healthy
okay,
boundaries.
Yeah,
that's it. How do we want people to show up?
Yeah.
We've got to create that expectation, put it out there
Yeah.
to get it met.
And just on Kaz's point, I think one of the questions I often ask clients is, you know, is the trust repairable? So sometimes what happens in
That's a good
situations, the trust breaks down.
Yeah.
And, you know, what erodes trust can be self-orientation. And, you know, what builds trust are things like credibility, respect and intimacy, like seeing the person, yeah. And so often I will say to the owner of the business or the decision maker, you know, is there any trust left between you and this individual? And if the answer is no, I often say, well, is it repairable? Because if it's kind of not repairable and it's broken, that's kind of where you do need to have a transition plan for that situation.
And the funny thing is, people, and I don't know if anyone knows this and they've experienced it themselves, is that it starts from the very first moment you walk in and meet the person when you first apply for a job, for example.
Yeah.
And there's things that people say in job interviews and then they're not followed through. So then the onboarding doesn't work properly and then you've got someone, and they're hanging on to that. And when you first start as an employee, you've got a little bit of hope left. Oh, they stuffed that bit up, but they might get the next bit right. And then something else happens. So then it's a slow erosion, you know, of the relationship from the very first day. So
On both sides.
100%. And for me, it's about being consistent and about making sure that your messaging is right and treating people well. I don't want to say the same because not everyone needs to be treated exactly the same, because everyone needs to be individualised. No, you want to be individualised to a certain degree, but that's what I say to people when we're talking about when things are broken and they don't know where to start. Start at the beginning. Where did we go wrong in the beginning, and how did we end up here? Let's unpack that.
And I think it's having that wherewithal to ask those curious questions.
Yeah.
And
not be frightened of the answer either.
Yeah, and if you've muffed it, you muffed it.
Don't be frightened of the answer. Feedback is
get a divorce.
but
feedback
is your friend.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and you've got to get feedback to give it.
Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about, you know, you say tomato, I say tomato, how we all hear things differently and the language we use in communication. How are we best able to work with difficult individuals in our business, side by side, when you just don't see or hear things the same way over and over again? Best intentions are there. Both parties want to be able to communicate.
Yeah.
But it's just not working.
I'm going to pick on the word here for a minute, which goes back to this lovely lady's comment before, is hearing.
Yeah.
Hearing's not good, right? So if there's 4 levels of listening, right? So and the worst of the levels is hearing, right? Which is sort of saying but you've not actually absorbed the information. So sometimes we are busy, or we do not slow down, or we do not remove the internal radio or the internal dial it back, and we listen with judgment, or we listen because we already know the answer. And so sometimes
you do that with my husband.
Yeah, right. And so I thought that's where you were going. Is that that actually is the problem?
Yeah.
So it's not actually what people are saying. It's actually the listening.
How it's being
so
listened to.
You know, there's hearing, there's listening to, there's listening for, right, which is using more of your senses, and then there's conscious listening, where you actually are present with the person and you use all your senses and you turn down your inner radio, or your in coaching they say empty vessel, right? So you kind of need to be an empty vessel to really use all your senses. So sometimes because workplaces flow fast, like there's a lot of bounce and there's a lot of movement and there's a lot of energy, and so sometimes, you know, differences of opinion occur because people don't slow down enough, or take the time to reflect, or take the time to really truly be, like, how you show up with people is super important. I'm guilty of it, like the next person, but it's that consciousness level to know. There's that side of it, and I think the other side of it is that sometimes they're just like, you said, conflict before it's healthy. So sometimes you actually want employees to disagree with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you also have to have feedback too, and sometimes it's about that win-win situation as opposed to I'm right, you're wrong. And so I think that's important too. Would you like to add anything to that?
Well, I was going to take a different tack on it from the perspective of where I see things go wrong with difficult employees.
Yep.
So never be afraid of when you have a conversation with somebody and you think there's a meeting of the minds, but they're a particularly difficult individual and you've had a history where you know that they may have either taken things out of context
Yep.
or when you hear difficult things, you know you only hear a small percentage of it.
That's right.
Right? So when you're in a meeting, for example, if you take doing redundancies, I didn't realise this until I started doing large lots of redundancies in big organisations, that people only, because they're in such a fear base when they're sitting in with you, they only hear like 30% or something of what you've told them. So you've got to make sure that everything you follow up in writing. So for me, and I know it sounds like a little bit of overkill, but a very, just a very matter-of-fact email, because I do this with my clients too, because you get on the phone and they're busy, they only hear a little bit, and then there's some key messages that you want people to understand, and it's not overkill. I don't think it's ever overkill if you're dealing with a difficult person to actually put it in writing to them and say, just wanted to summarise our, what the outcomes were and what's the expected moving forward. And, informal letters and things like that, I put things in a very, when I'm writing letters for other people, I break it down to the points that are the most important and probably the most difficult to hear. And people are frightened of doing that, but I just don't think there's any point
To not.
washing over it. You might as well say it. It's not scary. A lot of people are frightened of it because they're scared of the backlash. And you can say to them, I even say in letters, I think this is going to be difficult to hear, but blah, blah, blah. And I appreciate that that's something that's confronting for you, and I'm happy for feedback if you disagree. Don't be frightened of it. Just put it out there.
Yeah.
That's the only way I've been able to do my job in a way that I feel is authentic.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's just washing over things and you pick the worst things and you play a game. And to me, I can't do that. It's just
No, that game playing.
There's certain legal situations where you do things deliberately to push someone in a certain way, and you know that it's going to happen, and you have to do it because they're particularly litigious, and you have to do certain things. But that's my take on.
Is that your
employee
most
relations.
uncomfortable space in your role? Is that?
No, I love it. I love the strategy. I know it's horrible. And I say to people all the time, I need to check your comfort level around how hard we go, because I can go hard.
I want to be a fly on the wall, don't you?
No, it's about you managing people's expectations too. Because the backlash can be really big if you play big.
Yeah.
But also in teams, you want diversity of thought.
Yes.
And so it's all right if someone says tomato and you say tomato or potato, potato,
Yeah.
target or target. Like it's okay, right? I think it's and that's what I was go back to before. Know thyself as a leader or know thyself as a manager, because it's also being able to sit in the discomfort of that if someone doesn't agree with you or someone's challenging your point of view.
Can we add a know thyself as an employee as well?
Oh, totally. 100%. It's everybody, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I often get brought in to say, oh, we've got a problem with so-and-so, can you come and do some coaching? And I say, well, tell me about that person.
Yeah.
And often they don't know a lot or what's motivating them. And even today I was in a coaching session with a new client, and she said she's got 10 direct reports, which is a lot, right? That's a lot. And she was describing her last team meeting, and the person that was sitting next to her in the team meeting, who's one of her direct reports, was, every time she was saying something in the meeting, was speaking under her breath where she could hear it.
Oh.
And so she's I would say emerging leader, this young lady, and she said do I address this? How do I address this? She could feel it boiling inside of her, and then the lady did say something inappropriate, so she did call her in and have that conversation. And then that lady revealed that she was the spokesperson because there were other people in the room who had a previous conversation that didn't say anything. So she felt like she was loading the gun for other But can you see how that dysfunction just breeds?
Yeah.
And
But you don't make assumptions in that situation
no,
either.
that's why she said she was
So-
glad she had that conversation
Yeah,
with that
and-
lady. Yeah.
And what people often
Yeah.
do is they gear up for those conversations, and they come and they look upset, scared, angry, whatever it might be, coming into the conversation. And you've just got to find a way to just take a deep breath and go in and just look at it from the perspective of, okay, I'm going to ask questions and not try and predispose the
Preempt it.
outcome, preempt the
Yeah.
outcome.
That's it.
So if you go into the situation, any situation, with brave intentions and ready to ask the questions,
Yep.
and are able to get through it in that way, then it's a much better outcome
Yeah.
instead of, okay, I'm going to fix this.
Yeah. And
She's
that's
not
why-
going to talk in
yeah.
my meetings anymore, and she's not going to undermine me and make me look like an idiot. I was
Yeah.
going to swear then. Anyway.
But it's also a sign of low psych safety, right? The fact that nobody could speak up in the meeting, right? There's other things in play
Yeah.
that
Yep.
need to be looked at. And I think it goes back to that empty vessel thing, right? Not to prejudge or
Yeah.
preempt, like
Yeah.
just to sit in the space of listening. Yeah, which is
It's
challenging.
hard to do.
Yeah,
it's
it is
hard to do, and I know when you've got so many things
phone's
you need to
ringing,
get
the emails are
through every
pinging.
day. I get it, and people just want things fixed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it's really damaging for relationships when you make assumptions about people's behaviour, and then damage the relationship so badly that you can't repair it because people, their perception is they don't like you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's about behaviour. It's not the person, right? Is
Yeah.
it? It's the behaviour, not
Yeah.
people. Yeah.
Absolutely. We see with our business advisory sessions so often, founders, people come back to us and just say, I want to step away from the business. The managing of the people is
Yeah.
just destroying me.
Yeah.
I want to go back on the tools. I want to do
Yes,
anything,
what
but
I'm passionate about.
I
Yeah.
can't deal with the people.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting having that conversation and hearing what plays out. What would you say to them?
I need a holiday. Probably don't ask me. 3 years. I haven't had a holiday.
What would I say to them? I think acknowledge that it is hard.
Yeah.
I think sometimes you do see that model. Well, actually, that when we said change the game, that was the role we were playing. Is that change management piece for the founder to step back and put a general manager in.
Yeah.
So, because she'd been doing, her and her husband had been doing it for 10 years, and they wanted
Yep.
to do other things. So I think sometimes it is the right move.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, how would I go with that? I don't know. People leadership is for the brave. But, I think if you're going to take on people leadership, you have to have a stamina and resilience to do it.
Yeah.
Because people are complex, people are multidimensional, people have ups and downs. It's not as I said, like a straight path. You'll get people with mental ill health. You'll get people with mental well health. You will get people with some carrying trauma or carrying residue from other jobs that they've had. Even where we both used to work before, I previously worked at another employer. I did a 2-year project with them, and I didn't really realise when I changed jobs that I was actually carrying a lot of legacy from the last job,
Yeah.
because I found when I went to the new job I was asking consent and permission a lot to do things. So that probably comes back to what I was talking about before, that was out of balance in the other job. And so I was permission seeking a lot.
Yeah.
And it was actually the owner of that business that sat me down and gave me that radical candor or feedback and say, hey, you don't need to do that here, we trust you. But I'd come from a workplace where that wasn't, I was still in self-protective mode.
Yeah.
So sometimes how people play out in workplaces is because of something that's happened to them in the past as well. And it's not for the brave. But having said that, it's a bloody amazing thing to see people you've worked with. As I said, leadership's an act of service. And so, to see people thrive or go on to, I went to an event last week, and a guy I worked with 5 years ago who I used to mentor, he took the microphone and he was standing out, I was like a proud person going, "Whoa!
Look at you go."
Yeah, look at you go, and to see that, and I had a hard time in that workplace, if I'm honest. And I negotiated my own exit there because there was it was unethical practice going on, and they may have been on 4 corners. And just putting that out there. But like to see people come out of that environment,
Yeah.
and like that was worth it. Like that for me like was the reward. Come back all those years later. Yeah. So you just never know. Like for me, it's still a bit of a gift to work with people. Yeah. You know, and we've had the same thing. People work with the two of us that go out and come back in, and like that's what it's all about. Yeah. So yeah, but there are days where you think, am I doing the right thing? Yeah, for sure. Don't you think? You've had one of those days today.
Yeah.
Tell us about your day.
There might be some legal privilege I can't just no, the thing for me, and one of the thing that came up for me when you talked about leaders or people in business that need help, they're good. They have a skill. They don't necessarily know how to manage people, right? So we hear this over and over again in aged care. I worked in aged care probably 9 years when I first came out of uni, and so I would get phone calls from CEOs, especially when the Royal Commission was happening. And one of the big focuses that it had was about people, right? It was about how to manage people, feedback from staff, complaints from staff. There was a whole host of things that came out of that. And it was really, really difficult for them to even approach that because they knew there were so many problems. What are you going to do? We can't uncover this. We're going to have a disaster. All of a sudden people are going to start talking about it. And I said, well, it's there anyway. You're going to have to deal with it.
Yeah.
That's right. So how do you deal with it? With honesty and basically I always say, get somebody that you trust. And this is something I've found really difficult, is the vulnerability around actually finding somebody that you can bounce off and be really vulnerable with in terms of your fears and the things that don't work. What have you tried? You know, that kind of thing. So someone that you can bounce off. It doesn't have to be a coach. It can be just someone in your workplace.
Who's your champion in your team?
You need someone.
Who are
you
your
need someone.
you go to?
Yeah.
Everyone needs someone at work.
Yeah, and it's about kind of, no one's an island, right? So when you're feeling as if you are the only person that can save the business and all these problems, there's always someone worse off. But it's about sharing that problem and being able to find solutions and finding your people. I always say I've been very, very lucky since I started my business. I had a barrister, and barristers are notoriously terrible at helping. But my barrister, as a solicitor, I wouldn't normally have gone to a barrister, but I've got an amazing barrister that he'd been in business himself and had his own practice. So he's been incredible. Some days I ring him, he goes, you get out of jail free card today. He goes, I'll write that letter for you. Oh, okay. Sometimes it's just one of those things that, and the feedback that he's given me at times where I've just made a terrible error. I know I've got this whole big pressure situation around it, staff member or whatever for someone else. And he says, no, you did exactly what you would normally do. This person didn't react the way you thought they were going to react. So you've now got to find another way. So let's talk about that. So I think really sharing the problem. No one's an island. You don't know everything.
Oh, you don't have to carry it along.
Don't have to carry it along.
I might be completely wrong, but it sounds a bit ideological, what you're saying. I worked for an aged care facility for a while. I quit. But there was no, the Queen Bee floated around like she was like a beautiful person.
You're talking about the RN?
She ran
care manager?
She ran this place.
Yeah.
And this place was a beautiful looking place, but I couldn't cope because I just like the people that are in there, and I felt so sorry. And there were so many things that I thought of that you could have helped, reasons to get them to get out of bed, and so many ideas. And I came in and everyone was terrified of this woman. I was naive. I don't know. I'm not scared of anybody.
No.
I just presume that she's nice.
Yeah.
She wasn't at all. But what you're saying, I'm just putting it in where I was, and I left. But I don't know, and everyone was frightened of it, and everyone was unhappy. And one woman had been there for I don't know how many years, like 20 years, and she had 60 days left or something, and she was carrying it down. That's how unhappy. And I just
What was your name again? Sorry, Jules. Jules, those people are the ones that I have the conversations with, and quite often. Care managers, people like that, they employ. So a lot of my clients are aged care facilities. So when I'm dealing with the people problems and for example, a care manager, so they're quite often the people that are the most scared, the most confused, and what Nat was talking around the autocratic, the scary, that you just do what you're told, the blah blah, all that sort of stuff. That's where that comes from. It's very fear-based, and that's my experience with people in those roles, because there's so much responsibility on leaders in that industry. Yes, the Queen, yeah, and that's my experience, and what it comes across as incredibly prickly, incredibly difficult, and they're holding their cards very close. There's no leadership, there's no mentoring, there's no. This
Power
is generalising. It doesn't happen everywhere now, but that's my experience of that person.
What happens in aged care?
Oh, of course, and I spend a lot of time, which is probably outside of my scope. But were you aware that conversation you just had with that person, there was no two-way conversation? It was
One way.
Did you realise that's what's happening in that? Because sometimes I'm a support person instead of it depends on my role, depends on what I'm being asked to do. And have you tried, having a conversation about something in a way that's not as confrontational? And people often go, no, I haven't, because I just need to get it done. They just need to do what they're told. But that happens everywhere. That happens in hospitality.
Every industry.
In every industry. It's not just aged care. We're not aged care bashing. They do that enough on the media. And it makes me upset.
Yeah, but it's that power imbalance, right? And the ability to speak up and out.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and yeah.
And then she's frightened of the people above her.
That's right. There's usually some other power play going on. Yeah.
Usually it depends on the size of the city, but boards, they usually deal with a board who are inexperienced. There's lots of complications with that as well. But
Yeah. So
we're down in the weeds, aren't we?
yeah, we are a little bit.
it's good. So what do you do when you're in a position, you're an employee, and you like what you do, but there are people in your organisation that you work with that you just don't like, that you're just bearing, that you're just trying to get along with, being collegiate with. There's no power imbalance there. You're on equal footing. What are some tips there in how to manage working closely every single day, well, 5 days a week, with people that you just can't share values with, someone that you just can't share a laugh with, someone that you literally just don't get along with?
Just energetically, you're on different levels, right?
Yeah.
It's okay not to like everybody. That would be my first thing I would say. Like, give yourself permission that it's okay that you don't have to like everybody. It's the worst of that is that you have the disease to please, right? And you're people pleasing everyone, or you're overcompensating for that relationship. I think it's about, I'll go back to know thyself again, like what's triggering you about that relationship, and know what the because you can control that or get an awareness about that to maybe have better boundaries with that. Usually there's two rubs, right? Is it their character that's rubbing you or their competency? Yeah, and so
I find that second one really hard to
Competency.
work with.
Yeah.
People that purport to be very good at their jobs and are not.
Yeah.
And I find that really hard to do. I don't mind. I'm always friends with the most difficult people in the organisation, but I can't deal with people who just have no awareness about how.
It comes back to that curiosity piece as well. Like, and it's all right to have uncommon commonalities. So it's like, is there some level of connection you can get that's like enough mutual respect that even if you keep a separate boundary, that's okay. It's just when it becomes like that toxic, that, or it's destructive, or I'm going to be really blunt, you're spending too much energy on it, and you then running a narrative or running a story about that person to other people, and then it's like it spreads. And then really, if you find yourself over talking it, then that's really a self-reflection thing as well. But having said that, and I'll just put this disclaimer in, if it's repeated bad behaviour towards you and its constituents bullying, then you take a different path. So I'll just put that out there. But but if personality clashes is okay, right? You don't have to like everybody. I don't know why I'm looking at you then, because I do like you. But like,
I don't have to like everybody.
Yeah, but I
That's not back there now.
Is this it? Our friendship's
that's
over?
right. I've been pretending all these years. But like, you know, you don't have to. Like, I was involved in a project and they were the most dysfunctional people. I used to feel like I was locked in a room with the crazy aunts and uncles at a Christmas party, and, you know, the bad table. And, like, I had to suck it up because they were the union delegates, and, you know, and they were there for another reason. I actually found I could find something in each of them that I did enjoy, and that's what I tried to see that every time. But sometimes it's a stretch. Like, sometimes it's a stretch. So, yeah, give yourself permission. It's okay not to.
I think for me, and these are the conversations, the tough conversations I have with people around, have you fallen into that victim space?
Yeah.
Are
That's
you
right.
in that blame space? And that for me is a really difficult conversation for some people to hear. And that, you know, I'm just putting it out there. Would you like have a reflection on that and get back to me and see how you feel? Because if that's something that you feel you can work on, then let's have a conversation about some empowering ways of being able to deal with things.
Seriously,
reflecting.
that triangle's incredible. Even noting yourself while you're having a conversation, seeing how quickly
What role
you
you're playing.
move through
Which
that.
one
It's
you're
like, oh my God,
playing,
oh, okay.
Oh, I've done it. I've done it myself.
Cartman's is a good model. And so, what's the payoff for you from playing that role?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
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 Are there any questions for our guest tonight? Okay, let's get that microphone out and about. Oh, it's okay. We'll need it for the audio. Thank you.
What do you do with somebody that constantly cries?
Oh,
And,
yeah.
can you hear that?
Yeah.
There you go. What do you do with somebody that constantly crying and you've gone through months of coaching and you performance managed in a word?
Yeah. There's
But every
feedback
time
things.
you go, hey, you know how we agreed that you're coming at 9 when you're meant to start, but you're here at 11, and then they just start crying. So it's constant.
Is the crying a form of deflection?
Probably. It's an avoidance thing. So then we talk about why you're crying,
Right.
as opposed to you're 2 hours late.
Yeah. I'll have a crack first, and then you have a go.
Oh, well, I've been in situations where it's really serious issues like that you're dealing with and they're crying, and you just have to push on.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing, you know, I'm aware you're crying, I'm aware that you're upset right now, but what we need, there's some things we really need to discuss, and tissues, and are you right to keep going?
Yeah.
I've had people have asthma attacks. I've had people, you know, fall out of their chair.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
As long as you've done your
Fall out of their
like,
chair.
Yeah, I've had people puffers. Or,
Yeah, Trace, as long as you've done your due diligence around
Yes.
that. Yeah. So that's the key, like, because crying's just an energy release, right? Just a energy release, stuff coming out the body, right? So that's okay to be upset, and to allow people to have their emotions, But as long as you've done the due diligence around that, which it sounded like you had, you've tried different support mechanisms like coaching, you've done performance development, you've had conversations, but the messages aren't resonating. Is that the space?
Yeah. Do you ever get to a point where you go, hey, I just don't think this is for you?
Oh,
It's a
100%.
tough industry.
You have to. Yeah.
You can't have your crying.
Because sometimes, and that's what Kaz was sort of indicating before, that can be often a release for people that
Yeah, they're
because
relieved.
they can't make the call themselves.
Yep.
And they're looking for someone to make the call.
People just want to, when they're in the situation where there's, you know, they're likely to lose their job from a situation, they just want to know that two things, that they're going to be able to get a job after they leave. So they want to know that,
What
you
that
know,
transition looks
it's
like.
not that you don't like them, it's that, you know, the things, and that's what I said, be really clear. Don't pick stuff that's subjective. So get down to the nitty-gritty of what it is they're not performing on, and play those. Do not play the things that are subjective around the things that, you know, how you're sitting with someone and they go, oh, I didn't do that. That's wrong. I didn't say that. No, that didn't happen. You know, and it's like, well, okay, let's not go there. Let's go to the ones that we can deal with and try and simplify it as much as possible. But people want to know when you're in those situations that you don't dislike them, that you're not trying to ruin their lives. You need them to perform their job. And these are the things that are not working. So they want to know that they can get a job when they leave quite often. And so what does that look like? You don't want to tell them and say, I'm going to give you a glowing reference, do they? I mean, for me, it's about being respectful on the way out for everybody.
100%.
Yeah.
So I'm not getting rid of
Give
someone
people a good exit.
to if a party's in order, go out for dinner. You know, the whole thing. People want to be, you know, accepted and in the workplace and for who they are, right?
So
you want
acknowledge that they existed through
if
the
it's
process.
possible, as respectfully as possible. So, you know, a statement of service, a really detailed one, for example. I know this is getting very
good one.
technical, but that's really helpful to people. So you don't have that awkward conversation on the phone with a new employer. We say, well, we don't give references, for example. We gave a great statement of service. I can confirm that all those things, and we wish this person very well in the future. There's no hard feelings here.
Yeah. But if it's cyclic, it's time to change the direction. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Are there any other questions? Comments, thoughts? Yep.
Hello, thank you. My question is, do you have some great books to read or authors that you
That's it.
recommend?
Oh, yeah. Oh, God, I could give you a whole reading list.
Can you? For real?
Yeah, I can.
Can you email it through
Yeah,
and we
I'll
can... Yeah.
Yeah. If you, what sort of topics are you after?
Everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
It's good to be a generalist at this stage. Of
Yeah,
where I
that's
am,
right.
So
Yeah, sure. I'll send something through to Brooke.
Yeah,
Yeah.
books. Yeah, you've got a lot of recommendations on good
Yeah, there's
books.
there's a lot of like great free content out there,
Oh,
right?
that's
It's just
amazing.
about how you curate it to propagate it for yourself.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think, you know, when you said Brene Brown, I was kind of like, oh yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of podcasts. I do
Yeah.
a lot of driving.
Yeah.
Find some really, some great
Yeah.
podcasts to listen to.
Yeah. No worries.
Yeah, no, podcasts are great
Yeah, I've
too.
got Adam Grant.
You know, for new ideas and time. If you're a time poor like
Yeah.
me, I have to just read case law and stuff. I get to read books.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the car.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. We both
Oh,
travel
the
a lot.
case law stuff, because
Yeah.
you've got to, find cases and things.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Business Centre's got a podcast and reading list too, so we'll
Okay.
we'll
Yeah,
put
great.
it
Yeah,
all
I'll give you
together
some
and get that
introductions.
out there and publish that.
Yeah.
I've got one more question too, which
Certainly.
is a bit weird. I'm finding that a lot of leaders that I'm meeting have got quite narcissistic tendencies,
Yeah.
and I'm finding that trait is coming through more and more, probably because when you first started talking about this trait that we're not speaking up enough. And so this I'm inventing a new word here, pacifist,
Passivity.
thank you,
Yeah, that's all right.
is becoming more norm. And
We
which
didn't
is
sort of
then-
talk about, like, most people operate from a place of good, right?
Yeah.
Most people, yeah.
You find that
Oh,
people
I think
aren't
most
deliberately
people do.
trying to
Yeah,
do
but
anything wrong.
You can get Machiavellian types, and so we didn't mention that tonight, but they're the narcissist profile, there's the work sociopath, and when you they are very difficult type of personality type to work with. Like a hand on heart, have worked. She was the first female CEO I worked with. So I was really disappointed she fell into that category. Is that because their self-awareness is low and their self-orientation is high. And remember what I said before, that self-orientation is what erodes trust. And so their other thing that they can typically suffer from is not being open to feedback or not asking for feedback, right? I remember that particular CEO, she came to my office to tell me that was the 5th manager of mine that she'd let go in a year. Yeah, or made redundant, and she sat there and cried to me, and I was like, well, hang on, like, it's not about you today. Yeah.
All the mirrors.
Yeah. So, but it's she didn't, but then I just had to surrender and accept that she didn't have that capability to see that, and actually had empathy towards her for that. But also then I had to make a choice, right? Because it was not that aspirational leader that I personally needed to thrive. So it's a hard one, yeah, because the narcissist personality is a difficult one to navigate.
Is it just better to walk away?
Look,
Or is there ways of getting through to
uh,
that person?
it's more how can you adapt to work with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you find that you can and you can get a piece with that, then go
I
for
worked,
it. Yeah.
my first job straight
Yeah.
out of uni, I did law in my 40s, and the first job I had was with someone who was, I'm sure, had those personality types of traits, but that had 7 people through the job before I had got there in a very small amount of time. And I was so focused on changing my career and being, I had to ignore the behaviours. I used to call him on them. Actually, there was 3 of us that worked in the team, and the third person, I used to run interference with that person because I was scared to death the third person was going to leave on me. Every time I recruited someone, they'd leave. So every time I'd see him coming, I'd run out of the door. Can I help you with anything?
Taking a bullet.
to sort of, because that person would be in
human
their
shield.
job crying. And I'd be like, oh my God, we can't have another, I just trained them. I can't have another person leave.
Leave them alone. Yeah, right.
But I have absolutely been through with boards, for example, and with CEOs and leaders that are absolutely in that personality profile. And it's actually really sad at the end because, you know, I've seen coups happen and all this kind of stuff, and you know, and there's these big massive game plays, and it's not for the faint-hearted. I say to people, let me tell you, if you want to get rid of the most difficult person in your organisation, hang on, get ready. It's not going to be pretty, because you have to have those really tough conversations, and you have to call people on their behaviour and the toxic behaviour in particular. When people are called on it, it's almost like the mask. I had this interview once with this. She was in aged care. She was a care manager, and she was sort of sitting there in this interview, and she was saying, you know, I love working with the staff, and I love working with the. And it was particularly about. It was actually about that she'd found out something about one of her other colleagues' wages, something like that. I can't remember exactly. And at the end I said, thank you so much. That was a fantastic interview. I understand where you're coming from now. I just want one more question. And I asked her about, so you have no issue with the discovery of this wage, you know, discrepancy or whatever that you. And it was almost like a head spun around on a. It was, I just one thing, all of a sudden the whole mask came off, and she said, you guys are nothing, and she was just like spitting and yelling and and I was on Zoom and this is years ago, and I could see the CEO's face. He was just like, who have I had working for me? Oh my God. And when she left, he just went, holy crap, I did not expect that, because it was all calm and collected until just one question, just the whole mask, and it was just, anyway.
How exhausting it must be to keep that mask.
Oh.
It's a heavy mask.
And it was just, again, it's the questions. You ask a question and you wait for the answer.
Yeah.
And
They're often the people, as they say, people don't leave a job, they leave a manager.
100%.
And so they're often the people that person above them, they just say, well, you manage the staff under you. All the staff are scared of this manager.
Yep.
The person above them has no idea how bad they are, and all these people start leaving.
Yep. And nothing gets done.
No.
And that's the thing people are scared to address, because, you know, you've got, one of the first things I say to people when they say there's something wrong with this workplace, what's your turnover look like? What's your sick leave look like? What do your bullying claims look like? What does your workers' comp look like? And there's so many things that you can tell from how bad a workplace is purely from those things.
There's some good questions.
And would it often
Good
stem
flags.
from that one person?
Often, But the problem is that it's interesting with the most difficult person. I've always found there's a champion in their midst. So you start to unpack that for that person. This champion goes into overdrive, almost like their cheerleader. I can't even tell you how many times I've had that happen, and it's the most unexpected person, and they're getting some value out of it, right? There's a payoff for that because they're in a sanctum.
Yeah.
So you often have to, unfortunately, bring them both down in some
Yeah.
respects because it's
Yeah.
all toxic behaviour. It's
Yeah.
not healthy for
Yeah.
workplaces at all. But I'm actually, what I love is being able to have redemption for people too.
Yeah.
Be able to bring them along a journey and bring people back together. I absolutely
very
love
cool.
it. I don't like, I always say to people, if this person, particularly in what we've talked about, skill shortage, you know,
Oh, yeah.
if you've got people that are great with your customers, but they've got other issues, let's talk about how you structure their job then perhaps.
Yeah.
Is there another way to
Yeah.
do this? Because you don't want to lose that
Don't pull the lever
customer
too
base.
quick.
Don't
No.
don't be too quick to throw people away. They're not, you know,
Yeah.
they're
Well,
not
at the moment,
throwaway
the people
items.
aren't
They're,
there to replace them.
even though your biggest thing is I want to solve this issue and I just need this person out of my business, and I say, okay, let's unpack the full picture of this person. Are they good with their clients? Is there a payoff here? Are they good with something else? You know, and you know, Nat's brilliant at talking about what they call org development stuff. You know, and I always instantly ring Nat. Okay, what do we do about the org development? I can identify the issue.
Yeah.
No HR training at all, but
Yeah.
have to.
But I think it's about what's known spoken, yeah. So what everybody kind of knows about that works there. What's known unspoken, yeah. That's sort of sitting that people aren't saying. So they sort of say that 70% of people will believe what your employees say about what it's like to work there. 70%, right? Where 16% will only believe what you say about it, yeah. So what your people are saying when you're not in the room is what you need to pay attention to. And the other bit is the unspoken, unknown, right? And that's that gritty bit. That it's good to have an impartial to come and dig around in there for you, because it's sometimes that what you're not aware of and what they're not saying, or that's an undercurrent, right? Because there's always undercurrent themes happening inside culture. Yeah.
Well, one of the things I loved about the first contract that we did together, it was a disability organisation, and no one had ever asked the support workers what they thought. Well, it's not that they never had. The support workers had never engaged. They'd been asked, but they never engaged in the surveys.
Yep.
So we just started ringing them.
Yeah.
We've got a list of questions. Do you want to? Can you answer them for me? And it was amazing.
Yeah.
I was in tears. A lot of like talking to these people because they're so passionate about what they do, but no one had ever asked them what they needed. You know, and it was one of those moments where I sort of thought, this is beautiful. This is exactly what we need to do. You know, and I love that. I love doing that, and because I'm always doing all the difficult stuff.
Yeah.
I loved making those phone calls.
Yeah.
I said to Jamie, let's make more of those phone calls. I loved it.
For some people, it'd be a nightmare to make those phone calls,
I
but for
loved
you,
it.
it's like,
No, I loved it because I just wanted to know what
so
they thought.
pay attention
it's
to
great.
what people are saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or what's
Absolutely.
not being said.
Yeah.
Capture it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
acknowledge it,
Yeah.
figure it out.
Yeah.
Walk towards it.
Yeah. That's it. Walk
Yeah.
towards it. That's nice.
Yeah.
Mm.
That's
Yeah.
what our CEO says constantly.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
walk towards it, walk towards it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
complex. We said it started saying at the minute it's a jungle out there, but it is complex. But
Yeah.
you know, there's so many supports. You guys obviously
Oh,
support.
yeah, totally.
No.
Don't go it alone.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Don't go it alone.
absolutely.
Yeah. If
100%.
because if you get stuck, you know, it's all right to wave. We've all done it. Put the white flag.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
To whoever your people are that you can go to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments, thoughts, wanting to share?
Anyone got anything difficult that's going on for them that they
That they
could
want to share
value
on
a bit of
camera?
support?
I've seen it repeatedly come across people, and this is in temporary positions. They're not in any particular position of power, but they carry on like they are,
Yeah.
and it's usually a word from me, and I'll do it in a way that cuts them down in size deliberately. I have to, otherwise they'll just keep playing.
Where do you
with
think
their
that-
power trip.
Where do you think that comes from? When people act like that?
I don't know. It must be that I come across with a more relaxed demeanour than them. And that
You think
makes
that
them
offends
Is
them?
that how you would describe your
uncomfortable.
leadership style? Relaxed?
I am up to a point.
Yep.
When it comes to the crunch and I know that a line needs to be drawn in the sand. I'm
Yeah.
not afraid to draw the
Yeah,
line.
okay, so you're comfortable with setting standards, yeah?
It's taken a long time
Yeah.
to develop that within myself.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
You get that
have
when
to.
you've been on the
Yeah.
earth a few years.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yes, when you've been around the block a few times, raised a few kids.
I've got a friend who's a business owner. He runs a disability agency, and he was on the phone to me the other day. And he's the most human-centric, sees people, very empathetic. His mother's a Buddhist. He used to be a professional basketball player, and he gets people at work, right? He works hard at that practice. And he rings me the other day and he says, I'm fuming. I said, what are you fuming about? And he said, I've walked out the back, because he said, and the staff were on break, but they had their feet up on the table, and one of them was vaping. He said, he said I could feel the moment it was the steam come out of my head, like what to do.
Wasn't like,
Yeah. Yeah, well, I said, and he says, what are the rules on vaping? And I said, oh God, I've never had to deal
Do
with
you
that
feel
before.
that was disrespectful?
He felt like, well, he provides a really safe, lovely, comfortable environment, but he said that's also where people
Taking
eat.
it too far?
Where people eat and they had their feet up on the table. I said, oh, right, that's what's going on, right? He said, but it's all about standards, Nat. Where are the standards? And
Disrespect.
he felt
Yeah.
disrespected. That's
Yeah.
it. He felt disrespected. And
What did he do?
he said, it's going in the policy around vaping. And I was like, yeah, but mate, there's more going on, right? So, like, what else is happening that they felt comfortable enough that that was okay?
Yeah.
Or so are they overworked and that's why they felt like they needed to do that? Like, you have to kind of dig around that, you know, and it's also, but what I'm trying to say, even, like, he's really confident in his leadership, but in that moment he kind of lost it a little bit. I hope I'm still not being recorded, hey. But like, it's sometimes not hard. He didn't quite know how to handle it too,
Yeah.
because he'd never had that happen. So that can sometimes happen in your leadership too. You get faced with a situation you've never had to deal with. I mean, vaping's just a little example, but you've never had to deal with that before. And so it can push you a bit like, well, what is the appropriate response? And is it okay? Yeah, and I don't actually know the rules from a work health and safety point of view. Is vaping okay in a workplace? I've never had to deal with that. But like, where are the lines, you know? And that's just a little minor issue, but sometimes it can really push us as leaders.
Absolutely.
Because there's no precedent sometimes, or you've never had to do. I mean, he did address it with the individuals.
Then again, you
Yeah.
ask that question to yourself. That's about values for him,
Yeah.
right? It's not about the smoking.
That's right.
Absolutely.
No.
Do you,
no.
do you see that? Yeah. Do you
No.
see that?
Yes,
If when you start
totally.
to ask yourself,
That may have been
what
what
is
I told
it
him. Yeah.
that about this behaviour
Yeah.
is actually really bugging
Yeah.
me?
Well, this example happened today.
Yeah.
A woman was comfortable with doing a particular procedure. I'm supervising their HSC students.
Right.
And you've got to collate the papers afterwards in a specific number order.
Yep.
She was trying to explain to me twice how she does the procedure. And I just said, it was a bit dismissive on my part, admittedly, but I wanted it known that I've got my own way of doing it and it works just as well.
Yep.
So somewhere amongst all of that, there was a bit of a common ground. It was an unspoken agreement that we came up with. But it's like mind games with people, and it's a minefield. And
Take-
But that's a
when you're
win-win.
thrown in
Is that not a
position,
win-win?
It's in a temporary situation. You don't know from one day to the next, and you always got to feel like you're on your guard around people like that. And they're not, like I said before, in any great position of power, but they want to behave like they are. And it's exhausting dealing with them. And now I've reached the point, I've got to nip it in the bud.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, thanks for sharing.
yeah.
Excuse me.
I don't
Voice didn't work.
particularly want to because I don't like being confrontational.
Nobody kind of does.
No.
Yeah. But again, walking towards things is something we just have to
Yeah.
do sometimes. which is-
Yeah,
which is
and
great.
having the bravery to do that.
Yeah.
Oh God, like I've been avoidant, if I can say that.
Yeah.
Just for the first time ever had to set boundaries for someone. I've always been the worker. This beside someone, going, oh, it's that way,
Yeah.
and only this week I said sorry for something, and then I said, oh, actually, no, I don't mean sorry. I'm actually allowed to do that. And I said it to her, I'm allowed to do that. She's like, yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Trying to
That's where that culture of feedback's super important. You know,
Yeah.
you've got to give to get and you've got to gauge it. And the psychological safety, which is psychological safety, is just trust in group dynamics, right? So you can have trust between two people, but psych safety is when you've got trust in the whole group dynamic. So when we talk about
But the way,
but
the way
also
I try and explain it to some people, and this is something that really works for me when I talk about a bucket, right? So when you're giving feedback to people, often you can say great things about them, but there's got to be enough in the bucket when you need to tell them things that there's going to be difficult to hear. So when you are giving feedback to people, be aware of that. Because, I mean, for example, my kids, I don't know if who's worked at Macca's. Has anyone ever worked at Macca's? That was my first job, right? And they treat the kids like they're naughty all the time. You are in trouble all the time. There's no ever any good feedback ever, when I worked at Macca's anyway. And if you're in trouble, you had to pick up the pickles out of the car park. But anyway, that's my point.
Whoa.
But that's what I used to say to my son, was that when he worked there, I said, you're going to find that you're constantly going to hear all of the rules, all of the this, all of the that all the time. Because the workplace is such a fast-paced, that kind of environment, there is no room for... Occasionally there's a, well done.
And that's it.
And that's it.
Yeah.
But it's not enough, is it? In the current workplaces that we work in now, that's not enough.
I mean, feedback's a different topic, but with feedback, it's not enough to say to people, great job.
No.
They want to know what they did
They
that
do
was
well.
great,
That's
what
right.
they could then replicate, or what they could do more of.
What that impact was.
Yeah,
what the
and what
outcome
was the impact.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and that's your
Well, that's a
bucket
good
theory.
topic for us to talk about another time.
Yeah.
Feedback.
Yeah, God.
Yeah. Well, everyone, that's all we have time for tonight,
Oh, thank you.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies, for coming along, having a chat to us.
Thanks, Paul.
And they will obviously be around to have a glass of wine, I hope, with everyone.
Yeah, for sure.
So if you've got any questions, thoughts,
yeah,
wanna-
or if
wanna
there's something you
chat?
didn't want to raise in a public thing that you'd like
Absolutely.
to support with, just reach out.
have a one-on-one chat.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
So the next, pleasure, thank you. The next topic we're going to talk about is how different cultures can impact the way you may decide to run your business. So we'll look at a couple of different cultures and hear from business owners that come from different perspectives about what you may think you do every day, and see how we can learn a bit more, particularly ancient cultures. That's our goal. So hopefully we'll see you next month. Only 2 more of these for the year. Then we're going to do a wrap up again in December as well. So hope to see you at the next 2. Thank you.
Thank you.